respect again. How you gonna settle the scars? How you gonna live with the pain? How you gonna heal the heart? So find another way. How you gonna settle the scars? How you gonna live with the pain? How you gonna heal the heart?
Hello everyone, and thank you for coming this afternoon. My name is Salome Wagaini and I am Programme Manager at Season for Change. Realised that we are running slightly later than advertised and billed. We had a bit of an issue in terms of Eventbrite deciding not to send out the link to everybody. But yes, I'm just going to start the session and introduce Season for Change and Season for Exchange.
All birds, use birds.
So if we could all just ensure that our mic and so yeah, the session will be recorded. If you have any technical difficulties, please do let us know. We've got a wonderful tech host in Days Hale, so please use the chat function to flag any issues to them. Their name is Tech Host Days Hale on the chat, or else all messages will be defaulted to all attendees. We are starting a conversation across Twitter and Instagram. The hashtag is Season for Change, and this is the penultimate, no it's not, this is the middle of the week. It's been 3 weeks for Season for Exchange, and that is a precursor to the Season for Change Open programme. So this has been 3 weeks of online workshops, conversations and artist interventions to inspire artists and arts professionals to learn, share knowledge and talk about climate action and climate justice. The project is led by Arts Admin and Julie's Bicycle, delivered in collaboration with partners nationwide and supported by Arts Council England and Paul Hamlyn Foundation. And before I give the session over to Chiara and Octagon, we're going to share with you one of the artist interventions, which is a short video from Metis, High Carbon Culture.
High carbon culture.
High carbon culture. High carbon culture is working all hours to buy expensive overpackaged gifts to tell someone you love them, rather than giving them your time and attention.
High carbon culture is it being cheaper to buy new than get something repaired.
High carbon culture is a man getting on a train, farting in standard class, and then going to his seat in first.
It's wealthy countries selling their rubbish to other countries for dumping.
It's subsidising the oil industry while asking the public to do its bit for the environment.
It's working 3 different jobs just to pay the rent.
High carbon culture is seeing heterosexual sex as productive and queer sex as deviant.
Selling pink for girls and blue for boys.
High carbon culture is treating yourself to clothes, shoes, getaway, food, alcohol, drugs, anything to make the other 5 days of the week more bearable.
High carbon culture is when streets are made for circulation, not for interaction.
High carbon culture is driving to the gym.
High carbon culture is convenience.
High carbon culture is having it all.
We're collecting lots of examples of high carbon culture, and we would love to hear yours.
High carbon culture.
And as with the rest of the events as part of the exchange, this session will be live captioned. So if you would like to take benefit from that, Jean Goff is captioning tonight, do look on the bottom right of your screen and you should be able to either view subtitles or click on view full transcript to catch up with anything. Now over to you, Chiara and Octagon.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Hi everyone, my name is Chiara. I work at Julie's Bicycle. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm co-delivering today with Octagon.
Yeah, hi, I'm Octagon. You've probably received a barrage of emails from me via Eventbrite for this very session. I'm Communications Manager at Season for Change, and I come from a background that's a mixture of comms and performance practice and research as well.
So I am just going to kick us off very briefly today. Hopefully everyone can see that slide. So my own background is I've actually been working at this intersection between art, climate, and the creative community for about 8 years now. My original dream in life was to study, to work in wildlife conservation, but when I got to university to study science, it struck me just how much we've built institutions that are not very good at speaking outside their silos. And the question became, you know, what's the point in knowing in detail just how out of balance our ecosystems are when no one out here knows, let alone feels compelled to do or change anything about it. So that's one of the things that has led me to my work at Julie's Bicycle, trying to make those connections. And because I really deeply believe in the power of this creative community and everyone who's on this call to play a huge role at this point in time where there's so much on the line and so many things are shifting. When people in the environmental and political circles talk about art's role in the climate and ecological crisis, it's often quite a reductive sort of last link in the chain where the conversation is, we have really complex information and data. People are somehow not understanding it. Let's get an artist in to translate the data into something that people will understand. And that can be one of the roles we play, but it's one among many, many others. And I think in some ways it can contribute to a powerlessness actually that's sometimes felt because it casts this creative community not as experts, but as in service of the science, when instead we can be in service of the issue, in service of people, in service of our own life support systems, in service of moving hearts and moving political goalposts, in service of empowering, in service of making change in our communities, and in service of justice. There is a lot of fear out there, and it's silencing our creative voices in this most important of conversations. There's some risk aversion, so what if we alienate our audiences? To which one response is, okay, what's your purpose as an artist and what are your values? What are you bringing your audiences to? There's a sense sometimes that we can only speak when we're perfect, when we're the greenest ever. You know, this fear that if I say something about what I'm doing, won't people just point out the things that I'm not doing? And how we move from that into a place where we see this as a process and a journey and a conversation that we're having. There's a lot of lack of confidence sometimes and a fear of saying the wrong thing, which means we aren't getting heard at all. And also a feeling of isolation where people feel like they're outliers on this issue, like speaking out is going to get you branded as a troublemaker. And Season for Change actually came out of some of those feelings from Judith Knight from Arts Admin at the time in a What Next meeting going, well, what if the whole creative community across the country spoke out all at once? We all made creative work within our communities. We all turned our organizations inside out and told people what we were doing and used all of our brilliant voices together. It's been a slightly strange road to get here, but this is our invitation to all of you to use that voice now and especially in spring next year when we look forward to the international climate change negotiations in Glasgow and also look to government here and whether we're getting the policies we want and need. Just before we get going, one stat that I find really useful to remember is that 4 in 5 people are very concerned or fairly concerned about climate change in this country. So this is from a government public attitudes tracker. So, you know, when we're feeling that fear creeping in, remember that generally speaking, people are concerned alongside you. That concern might not yet be translating into action, and it gets a lot messier when we talk about next steps. But again, you are not alone as you might feel. And the second thing to remember about the huge sort of power and changes that are coming is that the Climate Change Committee estimates that around 2/3 of the changes that we're going to need to get us to a net zero society are going to reach into people's lives in different ways. So we can't just do it through technological changes. A lot of this is also through societal and behavioral changes, and it's going to be felt in our day-to-day. So thinking about the roles that we can play as a creative community to help create an environment in which that's possible and in which we help people work through those changes. Over to you.
Yes, okay, so to kick start our sort of dialogue that we're having today, we're going to open with a poll, which you can see on your screens right now. So hopefully Days, our wonderful tech host, will be putting an interactive version of the poll on your screens. Oh, yep, there it is. So if you could take a moment to answer this. We acknowledge it's a big and open question, but there is a reason for that. So answer as honestly as you can do. And then Days, when you start seeing the results coming in on that one, let us know. And what we're basically going to do next is we're going to go straight into breakout rooms, particularly in the context that Chiara's just given us all, and this sort of question and point of taking ownership where there is lack of knowledge and that being an okay thing. So everyone's voted. Days, if you could just give us a little glimpse of what those results are. Okay, so mostly, actually undecided and disagree if you add them up together, that is more than half of us. So on that note, we are going to move into breakout rooms now to discuss and unpack that a little bit better. So things you might want to talk about are the nuances in that question that giving a binary or even a 5-stage answer might not quite encompass, and where the difficulties and where you might be able to relate your own practice to this statement here as well, or where you may not be able to relate your own practice to the statement, because it might well be that you're at a stage in your practice where this isn't applicable yet, or it's hard to apply yet, and that's okay. So we want to set up a space where it's okay to admit that you don't know everything, and just to discuss the potentials that we could take from art to affect people removed from climate change. So Days is going to set you up into randomly generated breakout rooms. We're going to have about 10 minutes, maybe a little under that. And as Days has just put in the chat there as well, if you're making use of the captioner right now, decline your invitation for the breakout room and you'll stay in this main room where our captioner will also be, and we can continue the discussion there. So we'll give you a reminder when your time's running out, and I will paste the prompt into, or maybe Days could paste the prompt into chat, and we will get on with our first breakouts. So we've got Katrina and Leia in here. Are you two using our captioner at the moment, or are you taking a break? Because that's also fine if you need to take a break and not go into a breakout room. I will assume it is break time. Nice. Chiara, do you want to run? Should we run this for 10 minutes, or should we do it for less? Given that
let's run it maybe for a few less. Should we run it to, I don't know, another 5 minutes or so, 5 or 6?
Yeah, we could say 40, couldn't we? 4:40.
So you want everyone back at 4:40?
Is that all right?
Yeah, I'll do the countdown at 4:39.
Nice. So whilst presenting, I've also been answering an array of emails at the same time, trying to get links to this. And a load of people are saying that the Zoom link that's been sent out is for a workshop that's already happened. But I don't know, is that because this workshop's technically started, therefore, you know, I don't, because I'm really confused, because I took the link straight from our Eventbrite. On desktop, not Eventbrite, Zoom on desktop, so it's a bit confusing.
You should still be able to get in.
Yeah. The info at account.
Pardon?
Do you have access to the info at account?
No, they're all coming to my direct inbox.
Okay, I've also got some coming through, so they might be coming to both.
My one of the people I was emailing helping to get on got on and then messaged me saying, "Oh, you're presenting at the same time." And I was like, "Yeah."
If I DM you the invite from inside here now,
yes,
then that might help. I don't know.
It's exactly the same link that I put on there. It's really weird.
Yeah, the 00151 one is the one in the spreadsheet and in the email. That's the right one, isn't it? The one ending in 0015?
001.
Yeah, that's the one that if I do copy invite link right now, comes up.
Yeah.
Right, I'm going to ping that to more people.
I think the link that got sent might have been under pressure. That's what someone has screenshotted it for me, but I'm just...
Interesting. Oh, okay, so yeah, so what happened was I copy pasted the event reminder from under pressure, but then changed the Zoom to correct Zoom link. So in theory it shouldn't be a problem, but the only issue is with that reminder that went out, obviously because it's copy and paste from under pressure, it has the note about the under pressure's additional running time, if that makes sense. So people might have got confused just from reading the email but not clicking the link, possibly. I'm not sure. It's,
I think if we just at the end of this session, we contact everyone again with a message just to say apologies for it, if anyone tried to get onto this session and weren't able to do it for whatever reason, it was a technical hitch, but the session will be, the event is being recorded and will be on our website by the end of this week if you'd like to join.
Yeah,
take a look at it then, and just an apology. I think that's the way to approach it at the end of the half an hour after the end or something like that. If that can go out to everyone regardless of whether they joined or not, as in it doesn't matter if that goes out to people who did join. It's just a sort of
just got new people joining us, just to say hello to them.
Hi everyone who's just coming in. We've just sent most people off into a breakout, but we will be bringing everyone back into this main room within about a minute. So if you just hang on, we will continue. All we've done so far is introduce the session and have a bit of a discussion around whether the arts really do reach people who are removed from climate action or not. So that's what everyone else has gone off to discuss. If you want to just have a moment of thinking, we ran a poll and actually a lot of people were undecided and disagreed that was the case. So if you want to take a few moments just to think through that prompt in the next minute.
Should we start bringing people back in now?
Yeah, their rooms will close automatically in 5 seconds.
Amazing, thanks. Oh, see, I'm 5 seconds too keen, aren't I? Hello, welcome back. I hope that was enlightening and challenging and interesting at the same time. If you wouldn't mind popping yourself back on mute, if that's all right, because it doesn't do it automatically when you come back from a breakout room. It'd be fantastic. And then I'll hand back to Chiara for the next segment.
Thank you. I'm sure there is a lot that could be unpacked from your group discussions. I want to spend a minute thinking about what we mean by taking a stand and what this idea, I think, of a movement ecology. Another word for it, which Brian Eno used at our We Make Tomorrow conference earlier this year, was this idea of a Tropics of Resistance. And also what we at Julie's Bicycle like to call the creative climate movement. I think this idea of many different voices that are all coming together, both finding their niche and their strength and their voice within their communities and for the people who trust them, which might be on quite different parts of the spectrum, but all kind of talking about the same thing. And if you look at how change happens and how movements work, there are so many different roles within that. So from the top down and policy making, all the way to grassroots organizing and mutual aid and kind of having those conversations one-to-one within your communities. One example of these sort of dissections of movements is civil rights activist Bill Moyer. So he has the Movement Action Plan, which emphasizes that there are sort of these key trigger events that can catapult an issue into the public eye and build popular support. But then between that, there are also periods of, different hard work of getting people on board, embedding in change and action, embedding in policy in a way that might not be as visible, but that creates the ground for that policy and that change to take hold. I'm just going to share one other example. One second. So this is the Sheila Mccachney Foundation is a brilliant organization here in the UK that sort of supports campaign people to do what they do. And they have a thing called the Social Change Grid, which really tries to trace, again, all those different roles that play a part in change-making movements, from the sort of service provision, people who are working on the ground one-to-one with people around social innovation, around volunteering, to community and community organizing, neighborhood councils, which are more informal and in the public sphere, to very big public sphere social movements and protests and campaigns and mobilizations, and then looking at institutional power, so people who work more on a lobbying end, addressing government directly to try and make policy changes. And the reason I think that's, I find things like this quite useful is because your work might not be active in all of them, but if you understand your voice in relation to these others, you can also understand where you build collaboration or where you might be an ally. And some of this comes to understanding who you are. People listen to others who they hold in trust. So a good provocation and question for you is, who holds you in trust as a trusted messenger? Why do they trust you? And also, what is your position and your power that you can give to others to raise up them and their message and create space for them? One of my favorite examples in the climate sphere is a woman, Hayjo. She's both an evangelical Christian and a climate scientist, really looking at this question of what a faith-based response is to climate change. And there have actually been studies about how she's very successful at convincing doubtful evangelicals in the US about climate change. And they're one of the most hard to reach groups, but it's because she speaks to them as someone else who shares their faith and actually has a trusted voice in that community. On a slightly different part of that spectrum, you also have people like a woman called Debbie Dooley, who's a co-founder of the Tea Party movement in the US and a thing called the Conservatives for Energy Freedom. She's a renewable energy campaigner and quite an unlikely ally in some of this work, but she campaigns against big utilities because it chimes with her values of having sort of consumer choice and energy and the freedom to generate your own energy in a way that isn't controlled by government. So the reason I bring up those examples is because you can translate that into your own roles. So if you're a freelancer who's working mainly behind the scenes, how might you use your voice to take a stand and organize with others working in the sector? How do you bring up these issues in meetings? How might you use tools like a green rider or a statement of environmental intent to open up conversations with the people you're working with? If you're an institution with a really powerful cultural institutional voice, how might you use that position in power to empower voices whose experiences might not otherwise be heard? Or how might you use your institutional weight to open up conversations with politicians and your local authority or key suppliers in the sector? So it's seeing yourself as part of these movements and really understanding your levers for change. And the roles and skills of the creative community around sort of taking a stand are so far reaching, from helping people connect with their own creativity, regaining a sense of agency through things like participatory arts and cultural experiences that help shift people from consumers to creators and, you know, make them active participants in shaping our world, to more abstract art that puts us into a different experiential space, reframe challenges, see things from new perspectives, giving permission to think beyond where we are now, helping to bring people together to connect and collaborate and co-create, working to help facilitate different kinds of conversations between residents and policymakers and other decision makers about future choices we might make about things like transport infrastructure. Or the artist Blythe Pepino brought this up in an event I was in a few weeks ago, the importance of the skills of creatives and artists in designing protest actions, for example. So how sound design can make or break how people might feel about a protest moment. And also how we can help facilitate innovation and experimentation and prototyping. And our creative spaces and culture as a repository of human knowledge that we can still tap into. And all of those are different ways through which we can take a stand on climate and ecological issues and sort of translate them within our communities. Some of my favorite examples might be how Camden People's Theatre worked with young people on their piece Fog Everywhere to explore air pollution in their local authority. And then also gave them an outlet through that theatre piece to work through their response and learn about air pollution. And ultimately they performed that piece to local politicians in Camden, giving that sort of political voice to young people on air pollution that they might not otherwise have had. Or one of our nominees for the Creative Green Award is Picton Poets, which is produced by Shrinking Space, who are in residence at Medal in Liverpool, who are also one of our partners in Season for Change. And that project sort of introduced the latest climate science to young people in Liverpool, and then also brought them together with climate, environmental and social scientists from Liverpool universities, looking at how you introduce climate-related topics in schools' curricula with a focus on geography and art. And then through spoken word and poetry, actually worked with the young people who participated in the project to highlight what the issues were that felt important to them, eventually pulling together a poster campaign across Liverpool that was seen by 18,000 people. So, and the impacts of that have been a Liverpool Youth Sustainability Council held by Liverpool John Moores University, additional environmental projects, and also teachers who are encouraging pupils, for example, to write to their local MPs about environmental concerns. A different kind of example is Home in Manchester, who are doing a huge amount of work in their community and establishing the venue as sort of a centre for climate and environmental action. But one of my favourite things is the bees that they have on the rooftop and the way that they're using the bee as a symbol of Manchester as well, to make all of those connections between art and bees and climate and nature. We heard Nick Merriman from the Horniman Museum last week speak about how the Horniman Museum is looking at how they can activate their membership of families for climate and environmental action. So they already have this community of members, and how you work through that existing community to bring these issues to them. One of my other sort of favorite arts projects in this space is Test Sites by Arts Catalyst, which looks at things like water management in the Calder Valley in a sort of co-exploratory arts and research project to come up with this idea of what would a people's water policy look like in this area of the UK where we have a lot of flooding and we have to manage our water resources in different ways. And then other ways to take a stand is how you sort of making that link with what you're doing. One example there is Shambhala Festival, the music festival, who went meat and fish free a few years ago to start a conversation about how our dietary choices have an impact on climate, and sort of supported that through a very big communications campaign and programming. Again, all around this question, so you have the experience at the event that also backs up the conversation that they want to have. And then, of course, also stepping forward to support very specific campaigns in the way that Mark Rylance is currently backing the idea of a National Nature Service, or a band like the 1975 releases a track with Greta Thunberg. So how we're using these platforms to also raise up and give space to other activist voices. So leading into the next breakout, as a bit of a prompt, if you take a few minutes to think about how your community and your audience see you, what are your lines of trust to them? What might this mean about your strengths and how and where you can make an impact in terms of taking a stand and with your communication?
We've had someone just join us. If you want to explain, I can assign them if they wish to join.
Hi, yeah, we've just sent everyone into some breakout groups. We've just talked a bit about how understanding your position in your community can help you find where you can have the most impact. So whether you're trusted as an institution, whether you are working as an activist and trying to find your voice, but also being aware, yeah, of how you think your community and your audience perceives you, and what that might mean about your strengths and where you can make a difference on climate and environmental work.
I've just invited you to join a breakout room if you want to. Oh, they've gone.
I have to leave a little bit early because we basically my mum and my brother are probably moving to a new house quite soon, so I'm going to the viewing. But there's been traffic, so we might have to like set off a bit early. So I might not be able to do the like goodbye, but
That's all right. We'll wrap up. It's no problem. Is there any like particular like formula that or like really important thing to stress at the end that you've been doing?
Thanking everybody for their time. I guess there are some spaces tomorrow for the city's event. That's about it. Yeah. Whoa. Yeah. It's only 5, and look at outside.
Yeah. Agreed. I just did the same thing.
Yeah. There's a reason I didn't do 3 Glaswegian winters in a row. It just was too much for me.
2 is impressive, to be fair. As a southerner.
I like the dark.
Yeah, I know. So imagine being in Aberdeen. Ugh! And I wasn't taking vitamin D supplements back then. I have my Nessun.
Yikes. It's a brave move.
I used to stay up north when I lived in York at Christmas all the time, but it's quite a cheerful town.
My family we're all sort of descendants of Yorkshire miners, and my granddad was the first one to move away from Yorkshire to the south to North Devon, and although he did end up living in North Devon for he's been there a large amount of his life, he is like fiercely staunch about his ability to persevere through any weather in the most minimal of working clothes.
Oh yeah, like you don't go out with a coat on up north.
Could have possibly.
Yeah, my mum's side of the family are all Glaswegian. So it's just like, okay. I must have an internal heater of when do you want everyone back by?
Press the wrong button. Should we have them back? Should we start the 1-minute countdown now? I think hopefully that's given everyone some time.
Yep.
Sounds good. Hey, thanks for joining us again. If you don't mind popping yourself on mute for a little bit, if that's all right, that would be great. So what I'm going to go into now is actually kind of it brings the 2 prompts that you've discussed together a little bit. So I'm going to talk a bit about audiences and the ethics of engagement. I am a audience nerd. by trade, both in my research and artistic practice and as a comms manager as well. So they both tie in together. And for me, I think that what is really important to reflect on when we're talking about communicating to audiences and our, as Chiara's mentioned previously, about our relationships to audiences and the trust building that needs to go on, we can learn a lot from pedagogy and educational methods and the ethics of communicating in that sense. So I'm first just going to draw your attention to Paulo Freire, who is a fantastic theorist from the late 20th century, which sounds weird because it makes it sound way longer ago than it was. But Freire basically argues against a banking or transactional model of knowledge transferal, which supposes that the active agent or the educator, or in our case, the artist, holds knowledge and transfers it to an empty vessel, which in this case would be our audiences, or in Freire's case would be the student. So this banking or transactional model is something that is really important to be mindful and to attempt where possible to steer clear of when we're thinking about how we communicate our work to audiences and to the sector more generally. So Freire says that implicit in the banking concept is the assumption of a dichotomy between human beings and the world. A person is merely in the world, not with the world or with others. The individual is spectator, not recreator. So I think this has a really obvious tie-in, especially to environmental justice and climate justice, which a lot of us try to embed in our practices and should be working to embed in our practices, which is so to say that we ensure that the work we're creating around climate acknowledges the fact that climate change is disproportionately effective towards communities that contribute the least to climate change. So for example, the West's impact on climate change has an effect that is felt not only in the West but around the world. So if we're to think about this sort of negative conception of an audience as just a spectator to the world around us as opposed to a contributor or a co-creator, it's really interesting if we move to the next slide, please, Chiara, to take a look at this specifically through the lens of something that might be more directly to our own work as art makers or producers, which is to think about some theories of spectatorship. So in The Emancipated Spectator in 2008, Jacques Rancière stresses the importance of rejecting assumptions about audience passivity. So Rancière's work in The Emancipated Spectator essentially works to dispel the myth that audiences are passive and that creators are active. And I think that ties in really importantly to what we've been speaking about previously in terms of providing agency to the people that we are trying to reach, particularly if these are people who have previously not been engaged in climate change before. So it's not when we have the case of, okay, we're thinking of producing a new piece of work and we're hoping this piece of work is going to reach people that maybe haven't engaged in climate change or climate action before. This kind of stresses the importance of the fact that those people might be new to the field. It doesn't mean that they have no knowledges that can't be contributed towards the field. So what I argue for and what I think we should all try to be working towards is acknowledging this sort of site of unknowing that exists between creators and their audiences. So ways of doing that are to actively outreach in ways that are accessible to your audiences. So whether that's something simple like ensuring that all of your social media that you put out has alt text so that people who use screen readers can engage with your work, for example. There are such small actions that you can take regardless of the scale of the work that you're producing, regardless of if you're a sizable organization that has a visible and sort of more mainstream impact on the sector, or whether you're an individual that's just trying to program and produce and generate your own artworks. There are steps that we can take that can easily ensure that the conversation A is accessible and B actually takes into account the conversations that people that belong to communities that are sort of been erased by or erased in the sort of the climate debates that we see at the moment can contribute towards the field moving forward, because there is generally a reason why people are not engaged in climate change, and that reason isn't their own fault. So sort of bringing those two threads together, if we move back over to the next slide, please, Chiara. And coming back to Freire again, who is one of the major sort of proponents of pedagogical practice, which as artists we often think about in terms of research and artistic practice being melded together, but Freire centers it on action and reflection. So for Freire, it's not enough for people to come together in dialogue in order to gain knowledge of their social reality. They must act together upon their environment in order to critically reflect on their reality, and so to transform it through further action and critical reflection. So for me, what that brings up, or what that brings to the fore that's really important, is that you might be doing our outreach work, which is absolutely fantastic. You may be in the position to be able to hold focus groups with people, which is also an absolute fantastic privilege to be able to have, or a fantastic device to be able to turn to when creating new work that is aiming to engage new audiences. But what is crucial about that is that, again, this dialogue and this coming together is great, so long as it presupposes an action from both parties. So whether or not that is perhaps yourself as I don't know, a producer who's producing a work on climate change for the first time, and outreaching to the local community that concerns the work specifically, and thinking not only, okay, how can they get engaged? Well, you know, they can buy a ticket to your show, but also how can you engage in that community's efforts at the same time? So that might be, for example, attending a locally organised protest on climate, for example, and ensuring that the relationship between both parties is not merely discursive, but is also action centric as well. And it's a way of just democratizing that relationship and sort of making horizontal the presuppositions that we often encounter in the art world, that is that we as creators are somehow bestowing some a mystical knowledge that an audience might not have come to on their own. It's removing that assumption and saying, okay, how can I work with the knowledges that my audience might already have? How can I identify the knowledges that I don't have about that audience, and what actions can we take to support each other moving forward in order to gain new knowledges and create new knowledges together? So it's plugging that gap between spectator and passive participant and actor or creator or artist, active participant. It's flattening that relationship in a way, which is absolutely essential. So what we'll do now, after I've sort of talked about it in a theoretical framework, and we're going to move on to our last breakout of the day. So if you could move on to the next one. So the next one is sort of our breakout session is going to be on manifesting that sort of theoretical framework we've just been speaking about there, and also bringing together some of the threads that you may have begun talking about in the previous discussions you've had in the breakout rooms, and converting them into action or action points that you can take away. So for our prompt this time, think about someone you know who hasn't engaged with climate justice or environmental action. For example, someone you work with, an audience for your work, someone in your community, or a local MP. And then the next prompt and the next action that we'd like you to come away from this with is to note down 3 steps you're going to take to engage this person or group in climate. So some of the examples that you might turn to is sending an email to someone. That could be a local organizer, for example. Bringing together your trustees if you're in a larger organization for a meeting on environmental policy. It could be attending a protest run by a local climate lobbying group, or, as we've mentioned previously, ensuring that your social media and email communications are accessible by using alt text, for example, or by using a captioner for a live event, as we've got today. Thank you to Jean. So We're going to take those into our breakout rooms, and the key thing here is this noting down 3 steps that you are going to take moving forward. These can be big, these can be small, depending on the scale you're working on. The crucial thing is for them to be manageable for the scale of how you're working. And when we come back from our sort of discussions on these and our brainstormings in small groups, we're going to invite you to share just one of those steps in the chat. So just be prepared so that you can copy and paste into the chat, and we will see you on the other side of your discussions. Days, I'm just sending you those prompts in the chat. Oh, you got them, thanks.
When would you like people back?
Should we say 1:15? What do you think, Yara? Yeah.
I think, yeah, let's say 1:15, get them straight to sharing stuff in the chat, but I might chat over that bit to start wrapping things up.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. And then maybe once, after you've done your bit of wrap up, we can highlight some of the answers that have come through in chat, and then and then say goodbye for the day.
Bye, everyone. See you later.
Bye, Salome. I hope the housekeeping goes well.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Oh gosh, the idea of them moving in the middle of all of this.
Yeah.
My mum is a hoarder, so like it's going to be
less
I'm gonna
ideal.
take some days off to help. I'll see you later.
All right, see ya.
Bye.
Hello, welcome back all. Apologies, we did have to cut that one a little short, but also we're really grateful that you're staying on a little bit later than was originally advertised. So thank you all for doing that and for your contributions. That's great. So if you could pop in, if you're happy to do so, share one of the steps that you could take moving forward to engage the personal group you identified in your discussions for engaging them in climate. That would be fantastic. And then Chiara, I will hand over to you whilst people are copying and pasting and typing.
Great, thank you. And yeah, thanks to all of you for bearing with us. Obviously, this is a huge topic. In some ways, we've barely scratched the surface. It goes straight to the heart, I think, of so many of these conversations that we are having around climate justice, around making the changes that we need. Hopefully, you're all walking away from this with at least a couple of things that you're going to do when you leave within the next few days. And beyond that, I think a reminder to everyone that there is lots of help that is out there. So among other things, one of the first places is the Season for Change Toolkit. There is a section within that which is about taking a stand and speaking out around sort of a few key principles around knowing your audience, understanding their values and what's influencing their behaviors, being authentic and having integrity. So sharing the actions that you're taking on your impact as well, and making clear how your audience and people can contribute to those, telling that whole story and being authentic with where you are in your own climate journey, and also about what you want to see change in the bigger picture, and sort of looking outwards as well. Choosing the right messenger. So again, understanding who has a mandate, who you're speaking to, who is the right person to speak to some of these issues, depending on what your context is. And choosing the right channels and the right timings. So thinking about how people encounter information and what opportunities you have to communicate with them and they have to engage with you. A few key other resources point you towards, there is some of which are also linked, I think, from that Season Toolkit page, but there's a webinar which is quite a practical look at how you might communicate on your environmental action if you're a cultural organisation. We have a practical guide as well, a Julie's Bicycle practical guide, in terms of matching sort of messages to audiences and really understanding what works for framing. Climate Outreach have a huge number of guides and PDFs on everything from like how you speak to the centre right on climate change, or how you have conversations about climate and environment in your daily life. I love this resource from the Centre for Cultural Power over in the US, which looks at different cultural strategies around artists and activists. Yeah, more events like this and coming together. Sadly, Season for Exchange is drawing to a close, but all of the events will be posted, the recordings, so you can watch them back. We have a couple more left to go tomorrow, which is a workshop around making climate connections with Simon Curtis from the Royal Exchange and Manchester Art Sustainability Team and Lucy Neal. And also an in-conversation about sustainable cities with Amara Spence and Aranwira Guevara. And then tomorrow, sorry, not tomorrow, Friday evening is the Julie's Bicycle Creative Green Awards. So if you're looking for a bit of inspiration and connection on a Friday evening, there's definitely still space for you to join that. Octagon, do you want to go back and maybe summarize a few of the brilliant things that people have been sharing?
Yeah, I do. I hope you've been keeping an eye on chat, all, because actually there's been some really fantastic suggestions and also dialogue between people, which is great. So we have Vicky pointing out that that when they're approached to do pro bono work and volunteer time, they're going to ask whether they have an environmental policy before they give an answer, which I think is fantastic. And the act in itself, just the utterance of that and the bringing that into a conversation and dialogue, regardless of if the company that you're being approached by does have an environmental policy or not, brings to light the sort of the weight and the gravity of that question and the importance that most of us here could take forward ourselves, actually, when being asked to engage with unfamiliar people or companies, is just to ask the simple question. And I think it's kind of power in numbers there. The more that things like that, just the question being asked becomes commonplace, the more that sort of call to action becomes sort of something that can't be ignored. And actually, in response to Vicky's question there, Emma says that they asked them to donate to charity so they can claim back tax and also engage with values, which I think actually is a really, really interesting and fascinating accompaniment to that first action, is coming back with that, which is brilliant. Sammy's pointed out the small scale sort of changes you can make around you with even your housemates, and encouraging more sustainable food choices and travel choices, which I think is just a valid suggestion, as something that's speaking to much sort of broader the arts industry, and that is just as important, and a really great suggestion. I also really liked Penny's Penny drawing out the links between facilitating conversations between anti-racism working groups and green or environmental working groups in your organisation. My organisation, Arts Admin, we actually have those two groups as well. So that's definitely something that I can take forward into my workplace as well, because it not only again is power by numbers thing, but it's also the point we brought out at the start between climate action and climate justice, and making sure that our climate actions are situated within the context of colonialism is something that's really important, and is something that can be done within institutions, particularly if you're lucky enough to be in an institution that has an anti-racist group and a sustainability group or a green team. So yeah, thank you very much for that, Penny. That's a really great suggestion. And
I think understanding what's there already as well. So Vicky talking about actually looking up artists and people that she books at the event to see whether they've spoken out about climate and environmental issues before. So you can make that link, and again, not assume maybe that there isn't previous work that has happened in that space, and actually how you build on that as well. And find your allies, find your collaborators.
Yeah,
fantastic.
That's a great note to leave it on. Brilliant.
And I think on that note, finding allies, finding collaborators, do join us for the Season for Change open season, in terms of, again, having that unified voice. And lastly, look for opportunities to support other campaigns and movements, whether that is around Culture Declares Emergency and Music Declares Emergency. There are more activist campaigns, should we say, that take a more hardline stance on certain things that, again, that might work for your community. And then there are ones that are sort of more open and sort of generalist. One great place to start looking is also the Climate Coalition, who bring together a lot of different environmental and other social groups in the UK. So yeah, fantastic.
Indeed.
Thank you all so much for participating and for sharing your time with us.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for bearing with us with the late links as well, and hopefully we'll see you at one of the remaining events. Thank you very much.